Welcome to the Power Suite Podcast. My name is Chris Van Dyne. This is our third edition of the Power Suite Podcast Bowl editions. Just want to remind everyone that we had our NFL Game of the Year last week, and congratulations to anyone that jumped on board for that. The Las Vegas Raiders did exactly what we thought they would do, and Drew Lock did exactly what we thought he'd do. Raiders pulled that one out 17-13 at a pick'em, and really shouldn't have been that tightly contested. Some things at the end of the first half made it a little bit tighter, actually got the Raiders behind, but Raiders statistically really dominated that game. So awesome NFL Game of the Year winner. That means we won our college Game of the Year, our totals Game of the Year, our NFL Game of the Year. We've got one more Game of the Year left, and that is our Bowl Game of the Year. Now, I am recording this as I speak on Wednesday night as the Clemson Tigers and Iowa State Cyclones are kicking off. But we are going to post this Thursday morning. And guess what is going off on Thursday? Our bowl game of the year. So normally we give out a code at the end of the podcast, which we're still going to do. So still listen for the end of the podcast. There will be a code given out for that bonus. But since our bowl game of the year is going off and we are recording this final podcast edition of the Power Suite Podcast, the final bowl edition of this podcast, we're going to go ahead and throw out $10 off on the bowl podcast, on the bowl game of the year. That price right now is $79 for 22 subs, $89 for 21 subs, $100 for non-subs. So get $10 off if you use the code podcast. So podcast will be the code, $10 off, and that will get you, like I said, it's currently $79 for 22 subs. It'll make it $69, $89 for 21 subs. It'll make it $79. And 100 for non-subs, you can drop that down to 90. Additionally, you can call in if you don't want to go online and do that. Or you can go online, I'm sorry. You can go to ncsports.com if you're a non-sub and do it. Or you can call in 1-800-654-3448. Like I said, our game of the years have been really good. So hopefully this bowl game of the year comes through. And if you already jumped on board last week, you should have a little bit of extra money left over. Jump on board for this week's big game and hopefully get on board for that. Then, maybe make up some of that Christmas money you spent because, Santa Claus tends to be expensive. I know was rounding up the total amount of money I spent on Christmas presents, and it got kind of pricey. My wife is not she doesn't like cheap stuff. So I'm excited to make some of that money back, hopefully on this bowl game of the year. Our current bowl star-rated plays are 5-2. We do have one going off as we speak on that Clemson Iowa State game. So 5-2 on our star-rated bowl plays. And last year they were 7-2. So our star-rated bowl plays in the last couple of years have done really well. Our big plays have done well. So, like I said, this is a great opportunity. If you're listening to this on Thursday morning, jump on board. And I'm not going to divulge what time the game is, but you might have some time if you don't get it right at noon. So you still might have an opportunity. So if you listen to this a little later in the afternoon, you still might have a shot. So give us a call, 1-800-654-3448, or go to ncsports.com to get that bowl game of the year. In a moment, we're going to bring in Jim and Robbie to give our podcast picks for the year. And I just want to thank the listeners again. It's been fun recording this all year, and I hope everyone has a happy new year. So let's get into the picks. Welcoming in our North Coast handicappers, the illustrious leading Jim Seaman, the number one handicapper here in this podcast, absolutely running away with it this year. I believe I've got your record at 23 or 24-17. I lost my records here. But, you are well ahead of second. So Jim, you are the handicapping champion of North Coast in the Power Sweep podcast. Congratulations.
Thank you. Worked hard to be here. It's been a long time. Glad I could finally bring home the championship for my, mother and my family.
Maybe you'll finally get that raise, Jim.
Right.
Hey, he is the most popular person in his family right now because he is the best handicapper.
True.
All right, Jim.
True.
Like I said, congratulations. Robbie, me and you battled it out for second. We're gonna just call it a tie, I think, at this point.
I mean, yeah, our both were so far under 500. We're splitting hairs at that point.
Yeah, sad because as a whole, our handicapping this year was pretty good. We both had really good weeks and both had some stinkers. But
yeah, I mean, I think to kind of take the listeners a little inside information here, I guess, so to speak, we try to avoid games that might be in the mix for a late phone play just because we obviously don't want to give those out. But so we always didn't give away our best plays because we wanted to save those for the people that pay for the late phones, because obviously that's a perk of getting the late phones. So it's not like we just did a flat out bad job of picking games. It's sometimes there were games where we all said, let's avoid talking about that one. So not using it as an excuse, just wanted to throw that information out there because
yeah, but a lot of times. Oh, sorry, Chris.
I was gonna say I wouldn't say we avoid using games that are gonna be late phones because we used a lot of them. But
yeah, that's true.
Using the power sweep plays, which sometimes
I guess it's the power sweep plays because what's the point of listening to this podcast if you get the power sweep and look, they use 2 stars and a 3-star from power sweep. Why'd I pay for this?
Yeah. So we don't want to, our power sweep subscribers pay for those plays. We don't want to give those away. But we did use a lot of power sweep. I mean, a lot of late phone plays. A couple times it ended up being our top player, game of the. I know our totals game of the month was one of our plays.
I think the September 5-star was as well, and that wasn't by design. I think a couple times, at least, I can only speak for myself, but a couple times after I heard one of you guys or myself talk about it, I go, "Hey, I really like this play."
Yeah, that
so
happens.
You talk yourself into it.
Yeah. So, but
I digress. Go on.
Congratulations on finishing the season, regardless, because it is a trek to get here, and it's been a long football season. It's been enjoyable, but these bowls, man, they are not what we grew up with, right?
No, gosh, well, especially Jim, but
yeah, there you go again.
Not a knock at your age, Jim, but when you were younger, bowls were such a big deal.
Yeah, there were also a lot fewer, and getting to a bowl was a lot harder. It wasn't all the 6-6 teams. No, I remember, the bowls were a big thing of course, I predate ESPN. So there you go. I remember, when they were on broadcast television, and that was the big thing during bowl season. Watch the bowls after the bowls and figure out which ones you're going to watch. And, especially New Year's Day, you kind of, I can watch this game and then I'll switch over from NBC or ABC to CBS. And, now it's all on ESPN or ESPN2 or
ESPN or ESPN or ESPN.
I remember as a kid, there was a day where I think it was because of the New Year's Day fell on January 1st. And
New Year's Day always falls on January.
Sorry, New Year's Day fell on a Sunday. So they played all the bowl games on January 2nd, which was a Monday that week. And I had school that day. And my dad actually let me skip school that day to watch bowl games all day with him. It was a big deal. And one of my buddies texted me the other day and said, it's he's a Pitt fan. He's like, oh, it's terrible that Pitt didn't even get a New Year's Day bowl game. And I had to explain to him that New Year's Day bowl games don't mean what they used to. And now they try to spread for television purposes out all these big bowl games. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you're playing in a lesser bowl game because it's on the 30th or the 2nd or the 31st, or, it's just the way the television schedule sets it up is really what they're doing now. Excuse me. But yeah, so bowl games are way different than we used to remember them, and now,
of course, back in the day, the bowl stats didn't count either.
Yeah, and now the players, now the stats count, and the players don't even want to play it.
Yeah.
Lots
of opt-outs this year, and then now COVID's showing its ugly head again.
Yeah, our evil nemesis, COVID. The friend of no one, because man, is this messing up bowl season. Not that that's the worst thing in the world. I understand.
Yeah, there's a lot worse effects of COVID, but
but this is unfortunately one of the effects has been really knocking away at sports, and hitting these bowls, and like you said, you have a bunch of players opting out. Teams are just getting decimated. Sometimes it's making it easy to pick these games. We just hit a 3-star in Maryland on our late phones. That was easy. It's 47-10 Maryland. Virginia Tech was missing like half their defense. So, I mean, which way are you really going to go? A team that's full strength versus a team that's missing half their defense? It really does seem like the play is just go against the team that's had the more significant opt-outs.
Well, that was like the play that
it's actually
Jim gave out, and because Jim gave out Western Michigan last week, and they were facing Nevada, their top 5 receivers ended up not playing. Their NFL first round pick at quarterback didn't play. So, like, when you have a team that, and it's Nevada, it's not like it's Alabama who has 5 stars behind 5 stars. It's Nevada, so that was a pretty easy winner. The Maryland game, like you said, Chris, was a pretty easy winner. So it does kind of end up work. It is kind of nice when that works in your favor.
Yeah. Apologies for Mississippi State, though. That one's on me. We all liked it, but man, did they not show up? And
it doesn't help that. Didn't you say that they had like 7 guys that were announced as not playing right before kickoff?
They ended up – we knew they were down, I think, 3 guys. Their left tackle, a linebacker, and one other guy. I can't remember who it was. But we knew that they were down a couple starters, but we didn't know they were down 16 guys. 16 contributing players missed the game. Had no idea. Still surprised by the performance, to be honest, because they had their quarterback, all their receivers.
Yeah, because Texas Tech had some guys out too.
Yeah, and Mississippi State just didn't show up. I thought Mike Leach was going to be out for, blood in that game. And
yeah.
He was probably thinking too much about Pirates or something. Who knows?
Yeah. All
right, Jim, let's get started. I know that, again, you gave out another nice winner last week on Western Michigan. What are you going to lead us off with?
Well, just because I can, I'm going to go with the last Michigan directional school here from the MAC, and I'm going to take Central Michigan in the new Sun Bowl. They're plus 7.5. This game kind of got thrown together because of the cancellation of the Arizona Bowl because Boise got COVID, and then Miami of Florida got COVID, and so they were kind of looking together. And since Central Michigan was 4.5 hours away in Arizona, they worked it out with the MAC and Central Michigan to move Central Michigan into the Sun Bowl. So instead of Washington State taking on, if you will, a big Power 5 matchup with Miami, they're now going to be taking on Central Michigan. Right now, Central Michigan's getting 7.5. Both teams are not going to have time to, if you will, prepare for the other one as much as, of course, you would. They'll be kind of looking at some quick tape and all that. And Washington State, like I said, they're looking at playing Miami. Now they're playing Central Michigan. So I don't want to say that they're going to take it easier or all that, but, a little bit of flavors off because you're not, Miami kind of has, even though they haven't been recently, if you will, that high, it's still a name recognition team that you want a big win over, whereas Central Michigan maybe not. So far this year, Central did cover versus Missouri, that they did lose against the spread to LSU. Central Michigan came on strong at the end of the year. They won 6 of their last 7 games, and their only loss in that span was to eventual MAC champion Northern Illinois, and that was by 1 point, and that was a late score, 39-38. They've covered 5 of their last 6, including their last 4 straight. They beat that Western Michigan team 42-30 as a 9-point away dog. That same team that just destroyed Nevada last week. Now, the only thing is, I will say Washington State, they have won 6 of their last 8, and they're 8-0-1 ATS their last 9 games. But the thing to look at that is 7 of those games, they were the dog. So they're only actually 1-2. Or I'm sorry, 2-1 as a favorite, or 2-2 as a favorite. They were actually outgained in one of those by Utah State. They lost outright as a 17-point favorite in the opener. Washington State. Now, Central Michigan comes in. They actually have the NCAA's leading rusher in Lou Nichols. He's got 1,710 yards, 5.5 yards per carry. He is impressive. They ride him. Teams know they're going to run, and they still are able to make holes for him. Washington State's run defense has been kind of up and down. They held 7 teams under 150 yards per game, but they've also allowed in the other 5, they allowed over 210 yards per game. And once again, you don't have the time necessarily to prepare for a running back like this. So I think that gives a slight edge there to Central Michigan. The other thing is Washington State, for themselves, they're going to be missing 3 offensive linemen, their right tackle, and left guard. And their top running back opted out, and then their number 2 running back didn't make the trip. So those 2 combined for 90% of Washington State's rushing yards this year. So they're going to be going. That's a big loss there. Another big factor is stability with Central Michigan. Their head coach, Jim McElway, has been there. Washington State, of course, has had the issues because of not wanting to get COVID shots and losing their head coach. And, it's just a little bit crazier, whereas Central has really had the stability. I think they're a strong together team. They finished the season real well. Our power play shows Washington State winning by 2, which is probably right around where it is. I'm not saying Central, pull the upset, though they have the chance. But I think getting 7.5 points, it's should be a comfortable cover for Central Michigan. I think they can keep up with Washington State because, as I said, Washington State's down 90% of their rushing yards. And with Lou Nichols, they'll be able to run the ball. And I think it's, if you will, a solid game that nobody knew was going to happen until, a couple of days ago. So take advantage of it.
Yeah, I think that Central Michigan's in a prime spot here, and they have a big edge at running back, which evens things out. Should be a big edge at rushing the ball for Central Michigan. Washington State has the edge throwing the ball, so could be a lot of points too. I'll have to look at that total on game day. All right, Robbie, I know you're going to hopefully come through with a last podcast winner. What do you got?
Yeah, my podcast play from last week is actually set to kick off here in about 15-20 minutes, so we don't know the result of that one yet. So hopefully I can actually end the season with 2 straight winners Fingers crossed. But I'm going to go all the way to the final bowl game of the season. So I'm going to use one of Jim's favorite jokes here. This game isn't even going to be till next year, so you'll have to wait a little while. But it's
Not
the
one of my
Texas
favorite
Bowl
jokes.
between LSU and Kansas State, and this is a game that it's after all the playoff games and the New Year's Six games, so it might not get a ton of attention. You have a 6-6 LSU team that's kind of already looking forward to next year since they hired a new head coach and Brian Kelly. And you have a Kansas State team that went 7-5, but again, Kansas State's never been the glitz and glamour team, and you have a 7-5 versus 6-6 team, so not a matchup people are salivating for, but it's a matchup that when you look at it, you'll clearly see there's an edge in this game, and that's going to be an edge for Kansas State. I believe the line is about 3.5 for Kansas State right now. I would expect it to maybe even creep up to 4 by the time that game kicks off next year. So LSU's got a ton of players that are out. There's a good chance that a receiver starts for them at quarterback, because they've had quarterbacks enter the portal and then come back and then enter the portal and leave. And the quarterback that's still there, Nussmeier, they don't want to burn his red shirt, and he's already played in 4 games. I know they sent in an appeal, but I don't know if that'll get approved or not. So LSU may be down to a receiver at quarterback. Their number one receiver, who missed, I believe, almost half the year with an injury, still is number one. He's out. Their top 2 cornerbacks have missed time this year, and they're not playing here. Their offensive line's been banged up. They gave up 38 sacks this season, including 17 sacks in their final 4 games. And LSU's top linebacker, who led the SEC in tackles, is also out. So you got a ton of guys here for the Tigers that aren't playing. It just kind of seems like LSU is punted on this season. They have a new head coach. All their excitement's toward next year. And you have a Kansas State team here with a quarterback in Skyler Thompson. This is his 6th year, so this is his final game. And he's suffered quite a bit of injuries in his time at Kansas State, but he's healthy here. He's going to play. He was a little banged up, missed the last game of the season, but he's going to want to go out a winner here in his time. He's been one of the better quarterbacks at Kansas State when he's been healthy over his time. And not to mention, Kansas State also does have an electric playmaker in Deuce Vaughn, who not only led the team with over 1,200 rushing yards, averaged almost 6 yards a carry, 15 rushing touchdowns. He also led the team in catches and was 3 yards away from being the leading receiver for Kansas State. He had 47 receptions for 471 yards. So he is a lethal weapon that Kansas State loves to use, both in the passing game and, of course, the running game. And I expect him to have a big game. Skyler Thompson, after his latest knee injury at the beginning of this season, got away from running the ball and really focused on just being a pocket passer. And he had a pretty decent year. He hit almost 69% of his passes. Again, he only played in 9 games, so he threw for about just under 1,900 yards, had a 9-to-4 ratio. He's played well. He's a veteran. He'll want to go out a winner, like I said. Chris Kleiman's actually coached in a bowl game prior to this year. LSU has an interim head coach here. To me, it's just a giant mismatch. Not to mention, as I said, LSU's offensive line has both been banged up, and they gave up 17 sacks the last 4 games. Kansas State has a defensive lineman. I'm not going to try to pronounce his name, but he had 11 sacks this year. So Kansas State has a pretty decent pass rush. They had 4 defensive linemen, top 3 sacks this year, including their top defensive end. So I would imagine they'll get after whoever plays quarterback here. And like I said, Kansas State clearly has the motivation edge, I think, here. And I think 3.5 is pretty cheap. So I'll take Kansas State minus the 3.5 in the Texas Bowl.
Yeah, it makes sense. Remember just a few moments ago, I said pretty much just when you're handicapping these games, find the team that is more depleted by COVID and opt-outs and transfers and go against that team. And LSU is that team. They've got a lot of problems. In particular, they might not have a quarterback to play this game. So it might be Wildcat City.
Yeah.
I am going to go against an SEC team to the Outback Bowl. SEC 0-4 as we record this podcast. Rough
the
start.
sky is falling. The sky is falling.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, part of it is because they have the most NFL talent, and most of the NFL talent is opting out of these bowl games. So I'm going to go with Penn State. They're playing Arkansas. Arkansas comes in 8-4. Penn State 7-5. Big thing in this game for me is both teams are missing their top receiver. Now, for Penn State, that's tough because John Dotson's next level. You know, he's an electric receiver. You know, at times he was their offense this year. But I think they have the stronger defense, and they have other receiving targets to look to. They're actually getting a point here. And, you know, Parker Washington had over 700 yards. Keandre Lambert-Smith had almost 500 yards. So they have other weapons. Arkansas, after Treylon Burks, who also opted out of this game after putting up 1,100 yards and 11 touchdowns, they don't have anybody else that's a weapon. Their next leading receiver had 305 yards and is actually originally a walk-on that came here, slot receiver, Tyson Morris. They do not have a real explosive receiver left on this roster. And remember, this was a roster that has been through a lot because originally when Bielema was there, they weren't really recruiting big-time receivers. They were going after tight ends and running backs, trying to make this big power offense. Chad Morris came in and tried to build the offense differently, tried to make it into a spread offense. But he didn't have the personnel to do it. He didn't have the receivers. Matter of fact, I think they only had really one highly recruited receiver, and that was Burks. So it was just a depleted offense, and it didn't work for Morris. Pittman comes in, changes back to what Bielema did best, but you know, they still need to throw the ball. When you see that they're going to be very one-dimensional now, because they run the ball pretty well with Jefferson at quarterback. He's their leading rusher. They also have, he's their number 2 rusher. They also have Treylon Smith, who has 592 and 5.1 yards per carry. You know, that's good, but not anything to really pound your chest over. And when you take away their top weapon, I just think it makes this offense really pedestrian. And the way that, you know, the teams that have lost a lot of their talent seem to be playing, it really puts them behind the 8 ball. They've had some games defensively where you're concerned. They gave up 559 passing yards to Alabama, 417 to Mississippi State. They had some really good performances as far as their pass defense goes, but in those games, they got gashed on the ground. Ole Miss ran for 324 against them. Missouri ran for 251 against them. So the defense, while good, did give up 445 yards a game in their last 4 games. They did hold opponents 34 yards per game below their average. But I think Penn State has the better defense here, a little more known as a defensive team. Additionally, throw out the fact that Penn State has a coach who has been to bowl games, has had success in bowl games. James Franklin is going up against a guy in Sam Pittman who has never coached a bowl game. So I really think that Arkansas's teams typically play best as a big underdog. Now they're a small favorite. I think that the offensive edge goes to Penn State with Burks out. The defensive edge goes to Penn State. They're holding opponents to 344 yards per game. So I'm going to take the Nittany Lions here. I've got them winning by a touchdown. Even without Dotson, I think they'll be okay because, like I said, I think they just have the better offensive weapons. And I do think, though, with a month off, they should finally be able to get this offensive line to gel and maybe move the ball on the ground a little bit. All right. So that is going to be it for our podcast plays. Jim, I know you wanted to talk. We got the FCS National Championship coming up. I know you want to bring some stuff up about that.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of mention it. Once again, some people don't think it's, that great of football, but these teams are very good, especially when you get in the playoffs. January 8th, it's going to be North Dakota State is back in the championship game, and then Montana State returns to the championship game, except the last time they've been to the championship game was 1984, and they actually won that game. Chris, any idea who they beat? Yeah, I'll tell you right now, it's now an FBS team.
Coastal Carolina. I don't know.
No, Coastal wasn't even running back then.
Was it Troy?
No, it wasn't Troy. Louisiana Tech.
Okay.
They beat them 19-6. That was their only FCS championship game, and they won that. Now, of course, North Dakota State, they've been in the national championship game 8 of the last 10 years, won all 8 of those games. Didn't make it last year, which it's kind of interesting is North Dakota State came in as the number 2 seed. Montana State came in as the number 8 seed. But on its way, North Dakota State, they took on unranked Southern Illinois, were able to beat them, held East Tennessee State to just 3 points. And then in the semifinals, they held on. They had an interception in the end zone, and they were able to beat North Dakota State beat James Madison 20-14. James Madison had been number 3. Now Montana State, once again, they beat UT Martin, but then the 2 teams that they beat to get here were the 2 teams that were actually in the national championship game last year. They beat number 1 seed Sam Houston, who had not lost in 2 years. They destroyed them 42-19. Then last week, they played South Dakota State. It was 17-17 at halftime. Montana State shut them down in the second half, won 31-17. Interesting thing with that, other than beating those 2 teams, North Dakota State only has 1 loss this year. That was to South Dakota State. And in that game, they were actually down, I believe it was 27-7. And then they came back and they only lost by 8 points with a late field goal with about a minute left to make it 27-19. So Montana State does have a shot in this game. Most of the things we kind of look at it, I believe the line kind of opened with North Dakota State a 9-point favorite, and it's going to switch up and down a little bit. So I'm not going to make a prediction today, but the one thing to look at is North Dakota State. They always say defense wins championships. They come in with the FCS number 1 scoring defense. And the interesting thing here is Montana State has the number 2 scoring defense. So these are 2 very good defenses. Montana State ended up having their NC State transfer opt out for the transfer portal days before the playoff game. And they have a freshman starting, but he's a dual threat quarterback. When they played South Dakota State the other day in the semifinals, Tommy Mellett is his name. He was 10-15 for 233 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, and he ran for 155 yards with 2 touchdowns. So he's very impressive. It's kind of a wild card there in the game, but this should be a very entertaining game on January 8th.
Yeah, it should. And those FCS championship games, they tend to be very competitive and a lot of excitement. So, that I know technically it's lower level football, but it is good football, and we've done well in our small college plays. So make sure you jump on board for the small college plays if Jim has one, or if I might help Jim with that a little bit, but usually Jim puts a lot of thought into that. So definitely check that out on game day of the FCS national championship. Jim, any closing thoughts? Since this is our last podcast of the year.
Yes, this is our last podcast of the year. Just been a pleasure working with you two gentlemen. Well, I'm sorry, with you, Robbie, and I don't want to do the gentleman thing with Chris because that may be an insult to him. But no, it's been fun, and it's a lot of work. Hope you out there enjoyed it. Hope you'll be with us again next year, and stay safe, stay healthy, and have a great new year.
Appreciate it, Jim. And Robbie, any closing thoughts for the listeners? Anything you got?
Yeah, just appreciate you guys listening. This season, we wanted to make this podcast something that you guys could enjoy. So shout out to Chris for being able to get all those awesome guest handicappers every week. That was a nice touch to the podcast. And I got to be honest, I think I've said it before. I mean, when we're working 55, 60 hours a week during the football season, this 45-minute break to do a podcast is actually kind of nice. So we put in a lot of time and effort for it. So we hope you guys enjoyed listening this season.
Yeah, and I'm trying to actually squeak my chair just in case Sean listens or anything. Crazy.
Do the chair.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately he's not here, but maybe he'll listen. I don't know. I appreciate you guys, all the hard work you put into the podcast this year, and it was a lot of fun. Appreciate all our listeners. What do you think, guys? Since we got a couple minutes, what do you think to close this up? What $10 off next year's Power Sweep? Jim, what kind of code you want to throw out there this week?
Let's throw out Bison.
Bison, all right.
Bison.
Like
The FCS. All right. $10 off Power Sweep for next year if you use code Bison. We'll leave that up for a couple weeks here. That way, anyone who listens to the podcast before the end of the bowls gets to use that code. $10 off next year's podcast, next year's Power Sweep with that Bison code on ncsports.com. Or you can also call in 1-800-654-3448. And lastly, just want to say thank you to listeners. We enjoyed having you listen to this podcast all year. Hopefully you use Jim's picks, not mine and Robbie's. But and if you were a Power Sweep subscriber, if you did jump on board for the late phones, I hope you really enjoyed them, especially last week's NFL game of the year. It was nice to get that big win. We'll have NFL playoffs coming up. You'll have plays all NFL playoffs, Super Bowl props at the end of the football season. So keep jumping on board for those late phones because they've done pretty well. Jim, Robbie, say goodbye.
goodbye.
Goodbye. Take care.